What's up guys, welcome to Wasted Space, and I am back after a somewhat unexpected sabbatical, and I am going to immediately break the mould a little bit of what I've been doing up till this point by covering something much more AAA than I would normally be dealing with. In this case, I had access to the crew's closed beta over the previous week, did a bit of recording, and fortunately they've dropped the NDA on that beta, so I can now bring you kind of a little bit of an explanation on what the game is about. What I think of it so far and what I hope they improve so that when it does come to release there'll be a game there that's really got some longevity to it, because as I've said, I am pretty partial to my driving games and I quite like this idea of an open world concept for those driving games. So first up, a little bit of an explanation of what exactly the crew is for anybody who's not familiar with it, hasn't been watching the E3 footage or anything like that. It is a massively multiplayer driving game in which they have attempted to model a sort of portion of the United States, and having played it now, I now know that there's not been an attempt to model it completely accurately, but you are given essentially a map of the United States to freely roam about in within very, very little constraints. You can go where you will, and the game focuses around this concept that you form up a crew with friends who you've met online, who you know yourself, whatever that might be, and you go out and do various activities in vehicles around this area, be it race, be it take part in sort of player-driven events, be it take part in various skill challenges, or just drive around and have a look at the scenery. And the game is quite pretty, so that's definitely a sort of viable approach. Starting off with a little bit about sort of what happens when you first get into the game at the moment. The game has, and this surprised me quite a bit, quite a lot of storyline to start off with. You're thrown in very much like you would be, and I'm going to draw a comparison immediately with GTA, because this is a comparison that kind of follows through in a very weird manner, into a sort of in-depth criminal police investigation sort of storyline where your brother gets killed and you are left framed for his murder in prison. And the game all sort of kicks off when you come out of prison and what you're going to do about kind of avenging your brother's death and also writing off the records of your own criminality by helping and working with someone from the FBI. Now, obviously, this all surprised me quite a bit when I kicked off, because I wasn't expecting that sort of approach from something that's billed itself as a sort of MMO, no boundaries, free roaming driving game. And it is a little bit forced down your throat. I have to say, sort of, why is there this story at all? But I haven't played enough yet to make any sort of real judgment whether that story is something that's going to keep you focused a bit, keep you moving in a sound direction, or whether it's something that's just been added because they felt they needed a story in the game. Aside from the storyline, the progression system in the crew is very much similar to your standard MMO approach. So you have a player level, and that level advances as you complete various missions and challenges around the world. But on top of that, you also have a car level, and the two are kind of connected in that your car level is based on what parts you currently have equipped on it and what spec it is and sort of exactly how well that car performs. But you're limited as to how high your car level can go by how high your player level is. So I believe the brackets are something like up to level 10 you are capable of getting a car up to level 100. From 10 to 20 the car will go up to level 200, and so on. And these sort of two things interact reasonably interestingly, but from my experience in the beta at least, the levelling process was fine, but getting hold of the money required to then make use of the levels you gained was a little bit more difficult, and the game seemed to compensate for this very much by handing rewards to you for missions and handing out car upgrade packages as a reward for stuff, rather than you necessarily going out and buying it. Whether that's something that continues through as the game progresses further, I don't know. I got up to about level 11 in the beta period, and I think the maximum level is going to be 50 or 49, judging by what levels are available in the various shops you can go and look at. And yeah, they interact okay. The car levels kind of thing is merely a demonstration of how well your car performs, whereas your player level does have some associated perks. So for example, you can unlock certain parts that are only available to be used at certain player levels. But you can also, perks was a word I used there, and perhaps that was poorly chosen because there are perks in the game, and those perks are unlocked by levels, and they're a bit like a talent system almost. You put points in to give yourselves various small but across all of your vehicles benefits. Now One thing that's locked by the player level, but obviously has quite a strong impact on the game, and I could only test 2 of these various things when I was in the beta last week, and that is that there are 5 sort of specs of car as such. You start off with a stock vehicle, and then depending on what level you are and what packages you have available, you can upgrade it as either a street car, a dirt car, a performance car, a raid car, or a circuit car. So in fact that's 6, sorry, if you include the stock variant. And each one of these performs slightly differently, is capable of entering certain different events, and yeah, some of them are pretty self-explanatory. So your street car is sort of a vaguely modified stock car designed to be fast on the road. Your dirt car is a vaguely modified stock car designed to be pretty decent off-road. And these sort of dictate what missions you're doing, what challenges you can do, and switching around between them obviously adds a bit of variety into it, and the game will allow you to switch between the vehicles at any point you like. While you're out, you have something called a mobile garage, and you can just go and pick any of the vehicles you have available and switch to them instantly on the spot. Now, it breaks the immersion somewhat, but so be it. It's quite nice to have your various vehicles available to you at any point. So in order to go out and get yourself some upgrades and some more vehicles, you're obviously going to go and need to level up and earn some money, and there's sort of various ways to do this, so you're not completely confined within one set progression path and one set method of progressing further. But as I've already mentioned, the story does play quite a heavy part in this bit I've played so far. I can't promise or can't say whether or not that plays throughout the whole game, but it's certainly very prevalent to begin with that the story missions kind of take control. But there is, and while you're out and about travelling around, there are plenty of skill challenges, which are little things that you will automatically activate by running through them. And when you do so, you will be given one of a wide range of different tasks to do. A few of them are up in the video at the moment. And it's sort of little bits and bobs that keep things interesting while you're driving around, because obviously there's quite a lot of driving in this game, there's quite a lot of travelling between places. And aside from just sort of looking at the scenery, there's not a huge amount to do, and I'm sure that would get quite tiresome after a while. So the fact that they've introduced these mini on-the-fly games that also reward parts for your car and experience, I think is a really cool way of doing it, and a really cool way of making the journeys and the trips you take a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dynamic. Now, some of these obviously you're just going to stumble across as you're driving around. However, you are also capable of going and finding these big radar communication towers, some network that you've apparently got access to, you've hacked into, that enable you, when you've gone and found it for a specific area, to light up all the available missions and all the available skill challenges that are around nearby, so that you can then sort of, from a progression aspect, actually go around and start completing as many as you can. Not only that, but there is also the ability to repeat them, and you will get sort of small amounts of money and experience for doing them a second time, even if you've done all the requirements the first time round. So they're constantly going to be there as something to keep things a little bit more interesting as you're travelling about. There is, and this is, I'm glad to say, fairly limited, also a fast travel system, which I sort of frowned at quite heavily when I first saw it, and then found out that it's quite limited. You can only go within quite a small area. Say you're in Chicago, you will be able to fast travel to other missions within Chicago, but you won't be able to fast travel to anywhere outside of Chicago unless you go and use, there is a sort of transport system using planes and trains that will enable you to travel between cities. But aside from that, the fast travel system is nice and limited, so I was glad to see that, although I also do think it wasn't really needed. You could have got away in a game that's so focused on the idea of driving and kind of almost the pleasure of driving. Why make people not drive? Why give people the opportunity to cheat out of it? The second way you can go about kind of boosting your level and progressing through the game is by completing the missions, and these aren't always storyline based missions. There are some missions that seem to be area based. You can just go and do them when you feel like it. And what's quite cool about this side of things is they can be done by your crew, so at any point you can be driving around with a group of 4 people, yourself included in that, so a maximum of 4, and you are linked up through the radar system, through a comms system, you can talk to each other, and the idea is you can do pretty much anything in the game as a group, and you will be spending quite a bit of time trying to travel around like that, and forming crews, and then organisations that contain many crews, and that's going to sort of fuel the online events and fuel the online community. All of the missions enable you to do them co-op, and I said I didn't really get much chance to do that because obviously the best way of doing the co-op side of things is to have a crew and you just enter missions together. It does also support a sort of random play where you are in a session with other people in the local vicinity, and you will constantly jump between various sessions as you travel around, so that you're always with people somewhere nearby you. And you can start a mission and sort of start a lobby to see if any of those people in that session are interested in joining and completing the mission with you. And there are perks and rewards for doing it with more than one person. So I tried that a few times. Can't honestly say I had a huge amount of interest. People weren't that interested in doing the co-op stuff on the beta, but then again, it was a beta and it was a closed beta, so I didn't see that many people. Big area, not that many people actually got access to the beta, I don't think, and so it ended up being, you would come across people every now and then, but it was definitely not the case where it felt really, really busy. And this leads me kind of reasonably nicely onto the map and actually travelling around, because obviously people were quite spread out in what is a very, very large area. It is not, as I was kind of led to believe, in any way a realistic representation of the United States. If it was, I could also see it taking a very, very long time to do anything in it, so I can kind of understand why that decision was made. What it does do is give you a nice feel. I'm obviously, I don't know the United States that well, but I have been there, and the few places I've been look semi-realistically recreated. You can go and find the known landmarks. Things are laid out in a similar fashion. Whether that is down road by road, I kind of doubt it. I'm sure someone can turn around and tell me quite how accurate it is, but from that respect, it seems like there's plenty to do. It's not been made ridiculously large, but it's definitely been made big enough that, I've got a short video up at the same time as this that's just a time-lapse of me travelling from Chicago to New York, and the journey took about 15 to 20 minutes. Not completely direct. I did a few skill challenges on the way because I happened to drive through them, but other than that, I was going from Chicago to New York, so I wasn't stopping, I wasn't doing anything else. And that to me seems like a reasonably nice sort of level of scale. There's plenty of time to do. I can imagine that to get from one side of the country to the other is a task of well over an hour. If you wanted to do a full circuit, then that'll probably be the best part of a day to actually do it and make fun. But I think that's part of the point of the crew, is to be able to go and do those things, and that actually be a bit of enjoyment in itself. You go sightseeing. Obviously, you also have the ability to go pretty much anywhere you want, so you don't have to be following the road network while you're travelling around. But I will say, in the experiences I've had so far, and I did have an off-road vehicle, sort of a dirt vehicle and a street vehicle, you wanted to stay on the roads. Trying to do anything practical off-road just ended up you'd get lost, or you'd get stuck somewhere because you ended up down a dead end in some way, shape or form, or you'd end up with a big hill that you had to drop off of, and that would get you stuck in some way, shape or form. And in general, it just doesn't seem to handle as well off-road as on-road. So, that kind of works. It's a fun option to be able to do it. And I'm not saying this as a complaint, to be honest. I do think it's fine that the off-road is more difficult to handle and that you don't necessarily go on there as much, because there is plenty of roads to see, and it's very fun just driving around, seeing all the back roads, the dirt roads. I even went down the train tracks for a good 15 minutes at one point, But on that note, and the handling side of things, even though it handles quite poorly off-road, the on-road handling, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired. This is kind of moving on to what I actually think of the beta now, and one thing that's coming through that I think I was hoping for more of is it's very arcadey. It feels very, very much like you're playing Watch Dogs or GTA. It's that sort of driving engine at the moment. And I don't know if that's just because I spent my time playing on a controller. I do have a proper steering wheel, I just never bothered to get it out, if I'm honest. I will do next time to see whether that somehow perks up how the driving feels, brings it into a more realistic sort of driving feel. But overall, it was far too forgiving, it was far too floaty, the cars didn't respond like a car would. And there's also this slightly weird thing where it's very, very forgiving with you hitting stuff. If you hit something dead on, you will hit it. But if you kind of semi-clip things, the game has a habit of shifting them out of your way instead of making you actually hit them. I mean, it's just, again, very, very forgiving, to the point I think where it maybe has gone a little bit too far with how forgiving it is. Who knows? It's going to get developed further. This was the very first beta, the very first shot anyone's had at actually playing it and seeing what it's like in any real sense. And it felt very, very complete for that. There was no real network issues, the frame rate was pretty decent, although, interestingly enough, locked to 30 FPS in the beta for some reason. I'm sure there is a reason for that. It was evident that it's not going to be locked in future. There was a menu option for an FPS limit, so I assume that will go up to where you want it to be. but for some reason at the moment it was at 30 FPS locked, and if you went, you could go and config tweak it to be 60 FPS, but it wouldn't run any better, to be honest. You were going to struggle to get above 30, so I think that lock was probably for optimization reasons. It really is looking very pretty, but could be running quite a bit better, given that my machine is pretty powerful and it toasted it. I'm talking up to 80 degrees heat, which I don't see when I'm rendering, I don't see when playing anything else. It worked the hell out of my machine to make it run as smoothly as it did. I was also a little bit disappointed on the beta that I never got a chance to try out the player versus player setup, which again is like a solo or crew thing where you can enter with the 4 people. But for some reason or another, there was no one really doing it when I tried. I tried a few times and then in a few different cities, because you've actually got to drive up to the location to enter the PvP queue. And I just never ended up with any games at all, so that might be a byproduct of the fact you've actually got to go there to enter. Who knows? But it certainly felt like that would be a decent side of things, because I was also slightly worried about longevity. You know, how much variety really is there in the game? How long can you be happy with sightseeing and, you know, just kind of driving around completing missions and doing these little skill challenges? And what they have talked about, but there was no evidence of whatsoever in the beta that I played, is the idea of the community being able to create events and the community being able to work out and somehow fashion within the game various races, challenges and that sort of thing by exploring the map and finding the places that are really cool, the places you want to do this. You know, I found a couple of just exploring around. There were a couple of places where I thought, yeah, this would be awesome to be able to do some sort of race around here. There was a big strip mining area that I drove around just before the beta ended that I thought, you know, this is perfect, drift everywhere, and there was nothing there at the moment. That could be just because it's a beta, but they did kind of try and suggest that the central area, which is where a lot of this video is recorded, actually has all the quests and various bits intact, and it was the rest of the country that hadn't been finished yet, and that was going to come in future betas. So I don't know, I hope that they follow through and bring in sort of a really strong and really functional system whereby players can submit content, submit stuff for other players to be doing, and I think that could really drive a very social, community-driven side of things. And I also really hope that there is a very strong semi-competitive, semi-clan versus clan sort of setup that develops in the game. But both of these, I think, rely a little bit on the game becoming less arcadey, because as it stands now, if you can drive half decent on a controller when you're someone like me that so rarely uses a controller and is really not very good at it, then the game is too forgiving. And I think that might need to be sorted out if they're going to have that longevity and really build a community around the game of driving enthusiasts. Overall, so far, I think it's pretty decent. It didn't feel very beta-like, and I think with some tweaks it could be really cool. I really want to try out the crew side of things and see what it's like playing with other people and what it's like cruising around in a group. So if any of you guys end up with access to any of the future betas, hit me up, leave a comment below or drop me a message, and it'd be really cool to group up with you guys, see what your opinions are, and also just give a try of those crew side of things, because obviously it's going to be a real core part of the game if it's going to work like they intend. Otherwise, please hit like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. I'll certainly be bringing more information about the crew as we go further through its development. I believe it's due out on 11th of November this year, so unless they push that date back, they've not got that long to make those final tweaks and kind of make it that big, long, polished experience I'm hoping for. But they've had a pretty good start, I'd say, and this wasn't a massive letdown beta. This was definitely a positive experience. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.